Ever had a day where you thought you knew exactly who you were talking to, only to realize, in front of a couple hundred witnesses, that you had no clue at all? That's what happened the morning I watched Cadence Rowe turn an entire military base upside down, without saying more than a dozen words, just by taking off her jacket. You know what I mean? This isn't some war story about charging up hills or saving the world with one hand tied behind your back. It's about the kind of courage that sneaks up on you, quiet and patient, and then, when it's forced out into the light, knocks the wind out of everyone watching. It started with frost on the grass, that kind of cold morning that seeps right through your boots. Almost 200 of us standing in formation at Fort Harrison, steam rising from our breath, waiting for Colonel Reynolds to do his usual real soldiers don't make excuses speech. He looked the part, silver eagles, perfect uniform, big presence, and when Cadence, this tiny admin clerk barely over 5 feet, asks to skip the PT for old injuries, Reynolds let loose. All mockery and bravado. Toughen up like a real soldier. That's what he barked. Everyone smirked. No one expected what happened next. See, most of us didn't know much about Cadence. She kept to herself, always neat, always quiet, the kind of person who moves through a place without leaving ripples. 8 months she'd been with us. People whispered she was shy, or maybe just not interested. Nobody thought she was hiding a secret that could freeze a crowd. When Reynolds started picking at her, making cracks about paperwork injuries and soft admin types, you could see her jaw tighten, but she didn't say a word. Not until she calmly took off her jacket, folded it, and then lifted her shirt just high enough for the whole formation to see the mess of scars that laced across her ribs and back. Angry, deep, jagged things you only see in the worst combat reports. And man, the world just stopped. There were a couple of gasps, then total silence. Even the colonel, who never lost his cool. Here's the twist most people missed. That's when the crowd realized who Cadence really was. You could see the officers who'd been around a while, the medics, the old sergeants. They knew exactly what they were looking at, and suddenly the mood changed from awkward to reverent, almost afraid. That's the thing about the military, right? We love to talk about sacrifice, but when the proof is staring you in the face, it makes everyone take a step back and rethink their own definition of courage. Colonel Reynolds looked like he wanted to sink into the ground. For 30 years, he'd built a career on discipline, on the idea that toughness was all that mattered. Now, in front of the entire command, he was looking at someone whose toughness wasn't loud or showy. It was written into her flesh. I don't know if you've ever watched a leader realize, in real time, how wrong they were, but it's not something you forget. Cadence didn't make a speech. She just put her shirt back down, zipped her jacket, and said, real soft, "I'll be returning to my duties if there's nothing else." Not angry, not humiliated, just done. That's what silenced everybody more than the scars, I think. The dignity, the composure, the complete lack of need to justify herself. She walked off the field, and I swear, the formation parted like the Red Sea. Word spread across Fort Harrison in hours. By lunch, everyone had their own version of what had happened. Some painted Reynolds as a villain, others tried to make sense of Cadence's hidden past. What no one could ignore was that we'd all seen something honest, something raw, something the regulations and training manuals never prepare you for. And if you're waiting for the happily ever after, well, life's not a movie. What happened next was messy, complicated, real. Reynolds, for all his flaws, tried to apologize. Cover assignments. Cadence had to make a choice. Take a medical retirement and disappear, or start over somewhere new, where her past wouldn't be an open secret. She took a few weeks to think about it. Most people would have been paralyzed by the weight of that decision. She didn't want to walk away. She chose to move to Fort Bragg, training the next generation of special ops. Not hiding anymore, not pretending she was someone else. Her scars became credentials, her experience a lesson plan. That's how you flip the script, turning trauma into wisdom for people who haven't yet learned what real fear and survival feel like. There's a part of me that wishes the story ended with a perfect moment, a sense of closure. But life, especially military life, doesn't wrap up in neat little boxes. Reynolds was removed from command, his career ending with a lesson he'd never forget. Cadence became a legend, quiet, reluctant, but genuine. The plaque they gave her at her send-off said, "Courage is also what it takes to sit down and listen." Maybe that's the point. Sometimes the bravest thing isn't fighting through pain, but knowing when to reveal it. Knowing when to teach others that real strength isn't about passing a test or looking the part, but about carrying your story with dignity, scars and all. So, here's where I leave it to you. When was the last time you judged someone by what you could see, only to discover a hidden history that would make you rethink everything? Is courage something loud, or is it that quiet, stubborn refusal to be defined by someone else's assumptions? Drop a comment below. Tell me what you think about real strength, about second chances, about the cost and value of secrets in a world obsessed with appearances. Because stories like Cadence's, they're not just about the military. They're about all of us, every day, whether we realize it or not. What's your take? Who gets to decide what a hero looks like? You ever notice how the next chapter in your life rarely feels like a clean break? Even when you pack your things, change your zip code, start fresh with new faces? That was Cadence at Fort Bragg. Different state, same military smell in the air, same ache in her side every morning, same habit of scanning a room before settling in. Like a piece of her was always waiting for the next unexpected test. But here's the twist. At Bragg, she wasn't hiding anymore. The folks around her, the instructors, the brass, they'd seen things. Lost things, carried their own shadows. Her scars weren't a spectacle, just a kind of passport, a silent way of saying, "Yeah, I've been through it too." Her commander, Colonel Martinez, was one of those rare leaders who asked questions and listened to the answers, you know? She welcomed Cadence with a handshake that meant respect, not just protocol, and said, "We need instructors who can talk about fear honestly. None of that movie hero stuff." Cadence found purpose, not in telling war stories, but in translating the messiness of survival into something her students could actually use. She taught them how to think when panic set in, how to make decisions in the thick of chaos. Sometimes she'd say, "Fear is just another piece of intel. Don't ignore it. Work with it." That stuck with people more than any PowerPoint slide ever could. One day, this young lieutenant, Walsh, bright, nervous, eager, cornered her after class. "Ma'am, how do you know you're ready? Ready for combat, for everything that comes after?" Cadence looked at him, saw the same uncertainty she used to see in her own eyes, and for a moment, she thought about lying, telling him it gets easier, that training solves everything. But she didn't. "You never really feel ready," she said. "But you train until you trust yourself when you're not. And when things go bad, you remember what's worth protecting, and you move. That's all you can do." It wasn't just students watching Cadence, either. Martinez would sometimes ask her to sit in on strategy sessions, help rewrite parts of the training curriculum to be less about checking boxes and more about thinking, adapting, surviving for real. And every so often, rumors from her old base would bubble up, soldiers from Fort Harrison passing through, sharing their version of the infamous fitness test story. Some embellished, some missed the point. But the part that stuck was how a paper pusher had shut down an entire command without ever raising her voice. But it wasn't all growth and redemption, either. There were nights when Cadence would stare at the ceiling, tracing the old ache in her ribs, replaying that ambush in Afghanistan. Faces she couldn't save, friends she'd left behind. And now, instead of fading, those memories became lessons. She told her trainees, "Surviving doesn't mean you're the same. It just means you have more to give." The class always got quiet at that. You could see some of them shift in their seats, the idea settling in. A little uncomfortable, but true. Then came a twist nobody saw coming. Midway through the training cycle, a visiting general wanted to observe the new curriculum. Old school, all about discipline and appearance. After the demonstration, he questioned Martinez. Isn't it risky to let someone with a medical exemption set the tone for special ops candidates? The room tensed up. Martinez, without missing a beat, just pointed at Cadence and said, "You want to teach these kids about facing the unknown? There's no better example than the one who's already survived it." That moment spread. Quietly but fast. An officer standing up for one of her own, not out of pity but out of respect. The trainees picked up on it, the instructors too. Cadence became not just a survivor, but a standard. And that ripple changed the conversation, not about physical scars, but about what real resilience looked like in a world that never stopped demanding more. On her last day with that first class, they gave her a patch, not the official kind, but one they'd stitched together themselves. It read, "Truth before rank, courage before comfort." She kept it in her pocket after that. A reminder that her story, for better or worse, had become part of something bigger. And yet, life doesn't close the loop so easy. Rumors about Colonel Reynolds floated back to her, reassigned. Quietly, not in disgrace, but not exactly celebrated either. Some said he'd learned. Others said he was just another casualty of a system slow to adapt. Cadence wondered, sometimes, whether forgiveness was possible in places built on protocol and tradition. She never reached out, but she never let herself forget him, either. So here's where I toss the ball back to you. Have you ever realized, too late, that you misjudged someone? Or maybe, like Cadence, been forced to show your scars to prove you belong? What matters more in the end, the rules, or the reasons we sometimes have to break them? Let me know below. And before you go, share this story with someone who still thinks strength only looks one way. Sometimes the bravest thing is letting the truth show, even if it shakes up the whole formation. Because in this life, the lesson isn't about passing tests or looking perfect under pressure. It's about living with the scars and choosing, every day, to help others carry theirs. So what's your story? And how will you use it?